Thank you to everyone who stayed here. My name is David, and I'm a partner at Accelerace. We are a acceleration program and seed investor based in Copenhagen in Denmark. And I'm also a partner in the brand new Overkill Ventures right here in Riga, together with Peteris and Dimitri and La Telecom. I am here to tell you a story. And it's both a very fascinating story and terrifying story. But the most interesting thing about this story is that it's real. March 11, 2011 started out as a normal day in Japan. But at 2:46 p.m., something happened that changed the world forever. What happened was that 72 kilometers outside the Japanese coast, on the seabed, 24 kilometers down, two tectonic plates shifted position. And it caused one of the most powerful earthquakes ever recorded in human history. It was a magnitude 9.1 earthquake. But at the time, no one panicked because Japan are used to earthquakes. All their infrastructure has been built to absorb earthquakes. But 1 hour later, we would all learn that this was no normal earthquake. 1 hour later exactly, a mountain of water traveling with the speed of a commercial jet hit the Japanese shore. The mountain of water was 40 meters tall, and it kept moving inland 10 kilometers, and it demolished everything in its path. This obviously created so much human tragedy, and thousands of people were left not knowing the whereabouts and the condition of their loved ones. So everyone went on, took out their mobile phones and tried to communicate and find out if their loved ones were safe. The problem was that the water had also taken down most of the telco infrastructure, so people could not call each other. A group of developers quickly reacted, and they developed a chat app because people could still access the internet. And they called it Line. And not long after, they quickly launched Line, and not long after, it actually gained traction. And Line inspired other startups to create chat apps as well. So in the same year that Line was born, we also saw the birth of Viber, has estimated 900 million users today. Snapchat, we all know that, and WeChat, the biggest Chinese chat apps, boasting close to 1 billion users at this point. They were all born in 2011, and thus the earthquake triggered not only a tsunami of water, but a tsunami of a specific type of startups producing chat apps. But this was not the first, what we call a startup tsunami we've seen. The thing is that innovation moves in waves. What happens is that some general purpose technology emerges, that's what we call the earthquake, and a lot of startups, founders rush to this innovation and start building applications or building technology and building startups around this new innovation. We've seen it before, and we have seen e-commerce getting born with the internet. It traveled for quite a long time, 15 to 20 years, but when it hit, and we are feeling that right now, we're seeing the biggest retail foreclosure in history. In history, I have to go back to the depression years in the 30s to see this size of retail foreclosures, and it's happening at the same time as the Nasdaq, S&P 500, and the Dow are closing at record highs. Amazon today has twice the market cap of Walmart. And for most of my life, Walmart was the king of companies. Today, it's merely half of Amazon. We saw it today, we saw it again with streaming, the high-speed internet. We got fibers, we could suddenly send a lot through those fibers. And the broadcasters who usually owned all the TV eyeballs and all generations were actually watching their TV ads or their TV shows, and then they could sell TV ads to the advertisers. They got completely disrupted by streaming companies, and today Netflix and Twitch are the future, and they have all the young people watching, and thus all the investment or the advertising money are going to those companies right now. And then, of course, the chat app. So, I would say that today we are facing an even bigger tsunami than some of the earlier examples we have seen. Now, we as a startup investor, we are tracking these obviously all the time. And 1 year ago, I wrote a blog post saying, okay, so I think the internet has been one, I think mobile has been one, we do not know what's next. So it was this sort of calm water, and no investor really knew exactly where to place their money, but we start to see the contours of that today, and I would say today we're no longer in doubt what's going to be the big thing in the coming years. We have started to see a massive amount of startup coming out. In the past 5 years, we've seen 100% growth in funding rounds. That indicates at least 100% growth in the number of startups. We have seen Y Combinator go from a couple of hundred to this year, in the first half of 2017, more than 7,000 applications for the program, and they just announced they're going to accelerate 10,000 startups per year. 10,000. We have seen the world's biggest startup campus open up this year in Paris, not in Silicon Valley, in Paris, boasting more than 30,000 or 3,000 desks for people, and here we have newly elected Macron open the campus. And I think it shows that startups are no longer just a Silicon Valley thing, it's become a global thing. But more importantly than the number, they're getting a lot more cash. In the same amount of time as we saw 100% growth in funding rounds, we've seen the 400% growth in the amount of cash these startups receive. Today, we are going to estimate 2007 is going to close with $80 billion of VC money going into startups. And some example of how much money these guys are actually raising. Any of you been to Beijing lately? If you have been to Beijing, you would have noticed that the city is suddenly flooded with bicycles. 2 years ago, when I went to Beijing, or when you went to Beijing, there were no bicycles in Beijing. Not a single one, everyone was driving big SUVs. Today, the city is literally flooded with bicycles. OFO alone deployed 1 million bikes in China in 12 months. They raised, in less than 12 months, $1.3 billion. Less than 24 months. They were founded in December 2016. They raised $1.3 billion. And you think that's crazy? And you think that's the only one? Their competitor, Mobike, has raised close to $1 billion in the same amount. So that's two competing startups in China right now have raised a combination of more than $2 billion in less than 2 years. More importantly, just the number of VC money going in, what happens this year in 2017 is literally the most interesting year to be a VC. A new source of money just came in to startups called ICOs. It is basically crowdfunding done by cryptocurrencies, and we have seen that take off this year, and we'll probably see $10 billion of money going into startups through ICOs in 2017. Some examples, Bancor raised $150 million, and they did it in 3 hours, and this is the crazy thing about the ICO process, because there's no lawyers involved, there's no lengthy documents. They basically, these fundraising rounds happens very, very quickly. That is not even the biggest one. The biggest one so far is Filecoin, and it landed at more than $250 million raised without any institutional backing, just by crowdfunding. Guys like you alone who holds a little bit of Bitcoin or Ethereum, sending it their way into their wallet. This is mind-boggling. Okay, so I think it's safe to say that we have another startup tsunami alert. The biggest amount of startups with the most amount of cash we ever recorded is heading our way. And some of the startups that we're tracking in this tsunami are within IoT, it's within blockchain, it's within VR, MR, and that's called mixed reality and augmented reality. Those three alone are going to be absolutely massive individually, and they're going to have They're traveling fast. We estimate that they travel around 5 to 10 years. IoT has traveled a little longer because the install base for these kind of, the infrastructure where IoT is going to be deployed is a little longer, but we will see all these have massive effects. And we didn't really see the contours of that until this year, I think. We think that IoT will basically give birth to artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence requires data to become intelligent, and IoT will give that. We think that blockchain will completely redesign the internet, and will give it its native currency, such as it was also potentially envisioned in the birth of the internet we're working on today. And VR and mixed reality will become omnipresent and will basically take the internet, all the information, put it out here directly in front of us, attach it to locations, attach it to people, attach it to everything. It will become omnipresent. So for any corporates, or for those who work in corporates, I would say that ignoring this tsunami is just not an option. But what to do? The thing is that as a corporate, you do not know how to handle startups, because the way that a corporate normally interfaces with its environment is in three ways. They can either buy from them, they can compete with them, or can buy them. That's normally what startups or corporates are doing. The thing is, no sane M&A person would ever buy a startup because it's way too small. It's just way too. It's a lot of work to buy something small. Why would you do that when you could buy something big instead? You cannot compete with a startup because they don't have any market share in your industry. And you don't buy from them because the procurement process, they don't fulfill any of the procurement requirements that you have. So those are the three things, and you cannot do it. That's why startups are sort of, or most corporates are sort of paralyzed when facing these startups. Startups are building vertical industries, and they're building in parallel to the existing industry, and at some point, this parallel industry simply overtakes the incumbent industry. But we're not completely without tools, because we have had a long time to learn how to engage startups. And today we have been running experiments, and corporates, like we've seen, La Telecom has been running experiments on working with startups throughout the last 2 or 3 years. And I think we now have some learnings on how to do that. So first of all, corporates need to have somewhere to receive startups. Any of you who are a startup, and there are a few in here, you probably have something that is relevant for corporate, but how would you contact them? There's no startup at, that company email address. There, if you go to the website, it says vendor, it says press, it says supplier, it never says startup. There's no way that you can contact a startup. And the corporates do not know how to receive you. So you will start pinging random people on LinkedIn, but they're not the right person. Corporates need to have a dedicated interface towards startups. A couple of examples here that we have helped companies produce, that is Telefonica, Open Future. I've been working a lot with these guys in Madrid. Enel, Italian big utility company, and Accelerace, we help them run their acceleration program. Number two, what you need is a dedicated platform to really get to know each other. The thing is that startups are really good at a few things, and corporates are really good at a few things, but they are usually really bad at what each other is good at. That means that the corporate is really bad at innovating, and the startups are really bad at executing. But together you can sort of have a really beautiful mix, but it requires you sort of get to know each other, and you learn to speak different languages. So you need a platform to sort of get that harmonizing interface with each other. You can do that by simply working together and creating understanding by conversation. Here's an example from Denmark. The biggest insurance company has built this, they call the camp. They invite all the startups that does anything with insurance into the camp, and they will work there too, and they sort of get to know each other, and they can ask each other questions. So how does Tryg actually work? So how does your tech actually works? And they can sort of get to know each other. Another example here is that we helped a big utility company create that thing down there called Startups. That's basically Startup City, and that's the headquarters of the utility company. We placed a lot of startups very close to that, and the corporate employees could go to that building to learn about all the startups, and vice versa. IKEA is doing something similar. We didn't do that. We didn't help them with that. It's one of our competitors. I still want to highlight that IKEA is doing something called IKEA Bootcamp for IKEA-relevant startups. Number three, you have to make them ready to work with you. So not just inviting them to a space where you can sort of learn how to engage with each other. You need to take them through a specific structured process, and this is really important, and I think this is one of the big learnings that we have at this point, because these things has been tested before, but what always happens is that the startup enter this space, and the corporate in the beginning, the corporate employees go and look at what they got, but nothing ever comes out of it. And the problem is that these startups are just placed, and we hope magic happens. Magic doesn't just happen. You have to take them through a structured process, and you need to know what to do with these startups. Are you going to help them to fulfill all the procurement requirements so you can buy for them? Are you going to help them understand all your customers so you can partner with them? Or are you going to help them get ready for due diligence because you want to do the investment? And you have to take them through that, a very structured process. Now, we have helped startups do that. This is a utility company. Again, they're running a specific competition upon the accelerator where they are giving away a lot of money to the startups that have progressed the most on a specific goal, which is integration with this utility company. We helped Enel, I showed it before. Today, 1/3 of those companies that exited that batch are actually doing pilots with Enel, 1/3, and that is really a lot in the world of startups. That's because we work specifically with those startups to help them integrate them with Enel for 6 months. And we're working with Arla, the big dairy company in Scandinavia, and we are now helping that company find a lot of food-relevant startup and sort of massaging them into Arla, and they are now working with these startups and partnering with them. So it can be done, but we have to not do the mistakes of the past, and I will just highlight those mistakes, how to not do corporate startup engagement. We're still early, and we still need to know, still to learn from the past. We do not have the recipe yet, because this is learning in action. But do not just create something and hope the startups will come to you. I've seen that a number of times, and we've seen that a number of times. The startups doesn't just show up. You need to have a value proposition. Just because you are from a company that has a 100-year-old brand and are very famous, you mean nothing to a startup. So you need to create something that means something to a startup and has specific value proposition. You need to have executives be a part of this, because a startup don't want to meet the interns, even though you think that it could be fun for the interns, and these interns kind of know tech and are digital natives. It's really fun to have them around and do this thing. So the startups are seeking something they are not themselves, which is industry experts, technology experts, those who have access to the market. So that's why you need to have real decision makers, real business line, real VPs running this program. The third and the most important lesson, I think, is incentivize the employees to engage. I have seen this so many times where we help corporates source startups, introduce them to startups, but nothing happens. They don't even want to take the meeting because they have a very busy day and they're sort of being measured on something else. And talking to this pesky startup sort of takes them away from what they're supposed to be doing. So you need to establish with specific incentives in order for these employees to have time to actually engage with startups. Really, really important. Number 4, I have seen a number of these things been run by only corporate teams. And you need people. That's okay if the corporate employees have had startup experience, like in the case actually here with La Telecom and Christ, as we saw before. But if you do not, it is really difficult to speak to these people. It's really difficult also for the startups to speak to the corporates. You just don't speak the same language. Startups expect everything to happen at once. They think that a corporate is one organization. They think one of you can push anything through. That's just not, they don't understand structure because they don't have structure in their own startup. Vice versa, corporates don't understand startup. They don't understand why they have to change all the time, why every time they meet, they have to do something else. They just don't understand why they cannot just stick to one roadmap like we just agreed. So you need to have people in there to translate between the two. So in Overkill Ventures that we are running here, I certainly hope together with La Telecom that we can overcome some of those mistakes and do it right and do the best version of startup engagement we have seen. And hopefully then we'll be able to ride the tsunami instead of letting it kill us. Thank you.